Hello, I'm Ryan Torvik with Tulip Tree Technology, and I'm visiting today with Tim Geit from Magpie.
Embedded.
Yes, great. All right, and we are here today to talk about the Embedded Online Conference hosted by Stefan and Jacob Beningo, which was absolutely lovely. I know that just an overall, like just kind of a just kind of a 10,000-foot view. I mean, it was fabulous. I've gotten so much value out of attending. I had a number of my employees that attended as well, and it's
Oh,
just
cool.
they all have taken different things out of it. We've powwowed about it several times. We've talked about and shared different talk. Oh, have you watched this one? Have you watched this one? Because there's just so much content to go through, and the fact that everything is online, that's kind of the native experience is online. So it's not like you're missing something if you watch it next week. I think is super cool because I'm catching up on the talks. I'm going through because the biggest problem I have is that I didn't understand the format. And I know they posted like this is going to be the format. I'm like, yeah, I'll check it out later. And I had talked to Joe Schneider the week before, and he's like, oh yeah, it's well, and then immediately after the talk, there's a Q&A or something like that. I'm like, oh, okay. So I tried. That's kind of what I thought, and I didn't realize that there were tracks. So I didn't realize there were tracks, and then I didn't realize that okay, these four people will be on a Q&A the morning after that. Like, so this is at noon, 9 a.m. Those people are going to be talking the next day. It's like, oh, and then the midnight people are going to be at 3 p.m. that afternoon. I was like, so I didn't realize
Right,
that until
right.
like Thursday.
Yeah, so they did do it a little bit differently this year because I think in the past few years, it's been one talk and then, like you said, a Q&A session with that speaker, and that's kind of within an hour slot, and then that was going throughout the day. Whereas this year, there was that for maybe three of the talks each day, and then the other ones were, like you said, released, and then there was a group Q&A session. So it does make it kind of fun, right? Because you've got, like you said, a distributed watch whenever you want kind of thing, but then also a sort of real-time aspect, right? Which is based around when some of the talks are released and when the Q&A sessions are. So I think it's really good that people have the flexibility to watch the content whenever they want. There's the questions under the video, and we had the Discord this year, which was the first time they've done that, which I think worked really well. But I think having some of that stuff kind of real time, it helps to give you a little bit of structure, right? Around, okay, this is the week or the few days when Embedded Online Conference is
Yes.
happening.
Yeah.
And I know that if I join this Zoom session, there's going to be maybe 50 or 100 people who are all focused on the same thing, who want to get, some good information from the speaker or the group, who I can watch it with them, basically give you that a little bit of that feeling of attending the conference rather than just dumping like a YouTube playlist on you, with like 50 hours of content
Oh my
or something
gosh.
like that. So
There's an immense
I think
amount.
that's good. I think it was done a little bit differently this year, and some people were a little bit confused how to follow everything. So I don't think it was just you. But I think, yeah, that real time aspect is really nice. And yeah, it's good to hear that, you enjoyed it and your team, because I always try and tell people, I think the density of really good information at Embedded Online Conference is through the charts compared to any in-person conference
Oh
you
my
would go
gosh.
to. There's a couple of kind of advertising or like slightly padded talks, but most people are there to give very specific content, and it really is a by engineers for engineers type conference, I think.
Yeah. Yep. And I talked to Luca a little bit about it because I wasn't really sure what to expect when it came to the content to be there because I wasn't sure how dense it was going to be from a like, okay, these are the hardware registers you're going to need to write to in order to cause this thing to action. Like in order to
Yeah,
interact with this peripheral device, you should write to these hardware registers at this time. And I was like, oh my God, I didn't know if it was going to go like that deep into the actual. I haven't seen any of the talks that have gone that deep into the technical aspects of it. But I don't know, but the majority, but a lot of the talks that I've walked so far have been much higher level and much more about culture. Even the security stuff was all about talking about corporate culture and thinking about how you do even design systems or even work with systems, which I thought was fascinating because I was like, I thought this was an engineering conference. What are we talking about? Culture and like woo woo stuff, like thinking about how we design stuff. And I don't know. I really enjoyed the security talks, but I almost want to like just tell me, like, okay, no, just tell me what you did in this scenario to like make this thing do the security on this thing. Like, how did you make this? So that's kind of like I didn't see that. I haven't seen that talk yet, if there is one. But I did appreciate the discussion about the culture about it, and from a panel discussion, I appreciated all four of yours different perspectives on the same topic. And like
Yeah.
unfortunately I missed it in real life, but because I really enjoyed the panels. Like that was the panels were my favorite parts because I got to participate, and then I got to talk with other people on the side about the things that you
Right.
guys were talking about. Like that was, and you can't even do that in live because if someone's up there talking and you're just whispering to somebody across the room, you're like I really enjoyed that part of it. So
Were there any particular security talks, that you enjoyed? Any really, quite short, snappy overviews of memory safety or anything like that?
you had an opportunity, and I don't think anybody talked about it, but from an embedded, and this is where like trying to make people care about security and embedded systems, um, because even my family, they're like, oh, who cares, just plug it into the internet, who cares, what's the worst that can happen, just plug the TV into the network, like who cares,
Yeah.
oh, we've got a Fire Stick. Just plug. What's the worst they're gonna do? What are they gonna do? They're gonna get my credit card information. They'll just throw it away. It's fine. They're gonna like so like tying it back to like real world, like this actually happens, and this is why you do that. You brought up some examples of like WannaCry, and that kind of stuff, and like that's meaningful. But if I and I'd have to dig into it, but like WannaCry was like a Windows piece of malware. So like that's not my TV. That's not a Philips television. That's not my Fire Stick. That's it's not the Nintendo Switch. Somebody's gonna hack your Nintendo
Mhm.
Switch. Like so, I think that we've struggled to tie the bad things happening in the real world to embedded systems. The
Sure.
best example I've seen of that is the Mirai bots, like the bot farms where you can do distributed denial of services because somebody
Yeah.
owns every single cable modem in the United States, and they're just sitting there
Mhm.
waiting to do distributed denial or DDoS attacks against Facebook or something.
Yeah.
And then the remediation for trying to take those things down is like so difficult. But that's kind of where I've tried to see, and I haven't seen anybody talk about that specific kind of like, this is what, because ransomware, people kind of understand that, but ransomware is still happening through desktop computers and clicking on links in your email. So like
Yeah. Yeah.
tying that, like, okay, if I have an embedded systems, like this is what you can do. This is what a malicious actor would be able to do with an embedded system if it were not protected. And I think I haven't seen anybody talk about that specifically, which is the hardest part I've seen about trying to convince people to care about this.
Yeah, and I mean, I had my talk memory safety dance, so that's I was trying to
I've heard a lot of positive
hone in
statements
on that
about that
issue.
because you didn't have the same slide deck, format. You didn't, you did a little bit different, but a lot of positive
Yeah,
about
yeah.
that.
I mean, that's, I was trying to highlight these memory safety errors, right? Which, as I said at the start of that talk, can seem a little bit, maybe a little bit theoretical. Oh, okay, I know that's a problem, but it's not going to be that big of a problem. But then when you look in the last 10 years or so, the amount of money and damage that's been caused by these memory safety errors, either breaking Windows machines or being the first foothold into the system for an attacker, and that's probably something that you know more about. So I would be interested to hear if you thought I covered that part accurately. Um, and the software world has kind of been trying to address this with a bunch of new tooling, and I was trying to kind of expose the embedded systems world to that a little bit, and then also talk about, in particular, the Cherry project, which is a really interesting, memory safe hardware at the instruction level tool that's been developed over the past 10 years, and the chip that's getting taped out now that's implementing that is an embedded targeted product. It's not um, it's not for servers or for full Windows PCs like the ARM chips that they implemented first, where it's for IoT devices. So it's quite interesting that they have looked at the IoT space and the connected device space, like what you're saying, as a market that is potentially ripe for that kind of revolution and that kind of product where, if you implement it, there's almost an element where you can forget about some of the other memory safety issues because they're going to be captured by the hardware. I think you met them briefly at Embedded World,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
So that was interesting. Yeah, so did I cover the memory safety errors being a hacker's gold mine kind of view?
Oh yeah. I mean,
Quite well
and
enough.
you know, when it comes to like the kind of examples that you used are still applicable to embedded systems, which is
Yeah,
like
yeah,
terrifying to me because we don't see those in the kind of systems that I'm used to looking at. We don't like when you look at desktop computers, like you're not going to see a stack-based buffer overflow in a modern Windows system. Like you're just
yeah,
not. It's not going to happen. You're going after OS X. You're going after Linux. Like you are not going to see a stack-based buffer overflow of that nature. And so the hackers that are going after those kinds of systems have to find different techniques in different ways. You're looking at use after freeze. You're looking at heap corruption. You're looking at grooming the heap. Like there's a lot of different techniques that people use to get code execution on these systems that
yeah.
something like, the really basic that you showed, which is just a simple buffer overflow. The fact that it's like, well, why is that a thing? Why is that still a thing that we have to care about? Because
Exactly.
even
Yeah,
you just showed just overwriting, just the next buffer. Well, the problem is not necessarily in the next buffer. The problem is that on x86, the return address is pushed onto the stack. So if you can
mm,
override that buffer, you can continue to write until you get to that, and then you can just now you are jumping to wherever you want. And so like
yeah, yeah,
that's where, and there's a lot of things that people put into place to try to completely avoid this scenario and completely make it so that this is not possible. And yet in an embedded environment, it still is possible. And
right, because there's so many fewer protections on the
yeah,
system.
yeah,
There's still a lot of devices out there that are bare metal or using a very simple operating system and memory layout.
yep. And so Cherry's doing a great job. I think I found it really interesting that I hadn't heard of them until I met them in Embedded World, and like they're the idea is that because what we're into with security is that it's hard to get people to put money for it. Somebody even asked about it. How do you get somebody to pay for this?
Yeah, I thought it was a good question. I mean, it has to be asked, right?
Yes, it does. And I think the way you get it paid for is through the development team. You make it so that the development team is using a secure system that automatically does it for you. So you're not doing anything extra to make it secure. And I
Yeah,
think the Cherry product, even going like, okay, fine, we'll just build it into the architecture. We'll build it into the chip. We'll make it so that this is the instruction, like this is the length of this buffer, like that. We'll just put it into the architecture. Like there it is. And
yeah, and that's kind
that's
of
how you
why I
get people
think
to do
that
it. That
maybe in 20 or 30 years, all chips will have some kind of cherry type basis by default.
yeah.
And we'll be thinking, how did we ever get anything done when we were worried about these memory safety
Oh my
errors that we
gosh.
couldn't handle? Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
and they're emphasizing how um, little extra silicon you need to add that memory safety, and then also some of the extra concepts that you can build on top to essentially have containers or kind of encapsulation that can run on an IoT targeting microcontroller and gives you some extra software abstractions to control that, which all make a lot of sense. And a lot of the other tools that people use, like MPUs, right, like thread isolation, are essentially trying to also implement that behavior, but they are built on shaky
right.
foundations.
Right. And that's, you know, when I first started this business and I started talking to people who are not in security, and they just looked at me like, people don't take their vitamins, dude. Like, like security is not a thing it's so it's really tough to sell into. And you know, you think about how do they solve goiters? You know, the whole like thyroid problem that they were seeing all over America, and it's like, oh, they just added iodine to the salt because everyone's eating salt all the time. So you know what? We can't get them to take iodine medication, so we'll just put iodine in the salt.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, that knocked things back. So it's like, you know, making it so that it is just in the culture, it's in the water, it's in the food that you eat, it's in the things that you do, making it part of the hardware, like that's the best place to get to it. Everything else is just trying to paper over it at some level. Um,
Sure, sure.
so yeah, even you look at like something like Trust Zone, which a lot of people rely on when it first came out, like there were ways of getting under it. There are ways of getting under a lot of these things, even how low you go, you know.
Yeah.
We've seen attacks that have been targeting hard drives. That it's like they
Mhm.
get into
Mhm.
the actual hard drive mechanics. And so now
Yeah.
you and the only solution is to throw the hard drive out and get a new hard drive. And you're just like, oh, they had another is it Heartbleed, the one? There's another one that just came out, which is about being able to read memory off of a die from a different
Right.
process. So you can get out of
Oh,
the idea is that you can get out of a hypervisor so that you can cross
yeah.
on a
Yeah.
cloud
Yeah.
platform, you can cross between that boundary. And it's all the way down to the actual memory chip. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
uh.
But yeah, so I mean, in my talk, I was able to bring David Chisnall from the Cherry Project in and put a little excerpt of an interview I had with him in that.
Yeah.
Um, I think people seem to like the way I did the video. Like you said, there was a little bit different. And I do think that as much as the content is really good at Embedded Online Conference, um, I think there's a bit more room for kind of experimentation in terms of the delivery
Oh, for
and
sure.
really making the most of the fact that it is pre-recorded and that it's online, um, to move away from a kind of slide-based presentation, which, like you said, a lot of the talks were. So
Hmm.
in the past, the ones I found most engaging have been either more direct to camera, kind of full screen, with graphics and that kind of presentation, or demo code, right? Actually doing coding maybe in the window, or like you said, actually showing how stuff works, even compiling and things like that, because you can remove that element of nothing works when it's live because it's pre-recorded, right? So you just record the one time that it did work and
Exactly.
then cut the video and you can squash that in. Um,
You
so
almost
in terms of the talks that you saw, I mean, were there any that pushed that envelope a little bit, or just that you found kind of engaging, and why did you find them interesting, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, so to your point, like there's an interesting crossover between, you know, very technical conference and YouTube video. Like you have the
Yeah,
opportunity, but we
exactly.
find that most of us don't make YouTube videos. So
Right.
you almost want to make it, and the reason that if you go and look at views of YouTube videos, like there's almost like the ones that are just slides and a person talking are depending on the content, but it's very a low number of views as
Yeah.
opposed to
Yeah.
even there's a guy that I've been watching a bit of now, and he doesn't do slides. He actually, while he's talking, has a drawing window open and writes words
Mhm,
out
mhm.
on the screen while he's talking. I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
but like that's more engaging than just putting a slide up where he had already typed it up and saved it. So it's like just the kind of seeing how different ways that you could take advantage of the fact that you're online, that you're pre-recorded. You can throw in graphics, you can throw in,
Yeah.
you know, you can throw in sound effects. You can there's just you can throw in clips of other things. You know, you can throw in
Yeah,
a
yeah.
video of oh my gosh, what was the thing you put at the end?
Scrubs.
Yep.
Because that's where I got the idea for the name from.
Yep.
The safety dance, memory safety dance, was from that
From
clip.
Scrubs. Oh my gosh.
Scrubs.
So
And I thought, should I put it at the end?
do
I
it,
mean, it's kind of
do
a
it.
serious conference, but then I said, yeah, exactly. Just put it in.
So we'll see. We'll see how many people like feel comfortable with that. But if you don't do it, very often, or it's not something that you would normally do, like that, it makes sense that people wouldn't do that. But I think the ability to take advantage of that would be great to see people do.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, the live demos of some of the stuff that I've never seen before. I got to see, Jeff Gable did some stuff with the QP framework, and
Mm.
walking through that a little bit. I enjoyed that. My team and I really liked the Statesmith, where he went back and forth between turning writing, text, turning it into a UML document, and then turning that into actual code, and then being able to
Right.
interact with that and showing how you can like keep that consistent. I've actually got someone on my team right now who's actually playing with that to see if we can use it on a project that we're doing internally. So um,
Awesome.
there have been some good there. Luca's was interesting. It was very much like talking to a slide, um, but the content was very much his experience of trying to work with companies around their process and seeing them get tripped up by their own process,
Yeah.
and his
Yeah.
thoughts about that. But at the same time, Luca's great for just phrases. Like he'll just say something. I'm like, I can't believe you just said that in that way. And I'm just like, it's so good. I actually put him in Discord. I'm like, oh, he said this too. Oh, he said this too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
He has some good catchphrases. And I definitely, a lot of the time, if I hear Luca when he goes on a little rant about something, and he gets a lot of energy, and I'm just listening to it, I'm going, he's right. He's right about that as well. So I know these things, and someone, who because he comes from the agile management side of things and working, like you said, on the process, a little bit less than the engineering side. But there's a lot of things I hear him say, like, oh, that's right. Now, how do I actually
do something with it.
convince, yeah, exactly, the company or team that I'm in, to try and implement that? But that's definitely something I've taken from the conference over the years when I've attended is these good ideas from people, and I think embedded systems is such a nebulous term anyway, right? And embedded software and trying to gather the people that do it is quite hard because there's so many different industries and so many things that fall under that banner. Um, and that's what the conference is good at, is exposing some of those different areas, like you said, getting an overview from somebody who's has been working in it. Um, and just understanding how they think about things, because there's a lot of people who are quite experienced engineers, presenting at the conference, who've been through their fair share of projects and arguments with management and all those kind of things, who can really share, yeah, their experience. And so I think definitely for people who are newer to the industry for whatever reason, it's a really good way to level up quickly, right? Rather than having to kind of go through and learn all of those lessons yourself.
Yeah. So you want to talk about AI or not?
Yeah, we could talk about it. I mean, I saw Jacob's first keynote where he was talking about some of the things to make a kind of high performing team or process, right? And the AI was included at the end of that. I didn't catch his full keynote on what
Oh
AI
yeah,
did and all the
if you
things.
haven't watched it, you should go back and watch it for sure. Yeah, I was active. I was very active in the chat on the side of
Right.
that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, his kind of like conclusion keynote. He was very brave. He tried to do some AI. No, I would. There was a bit of vibe coding that he was doing live, and
Yeah. Yeah.
that did not go as he planned. And it got itself in such a state, and he couldn't get it out of it, and he had to like, okay, anyways, moving on. But it was like, I'm watching it happen, going like, oh man, you got stuck. Oh, something happened. I can't. We can't help you. We just have to
Yeah.
watch. Like,
Yeah.
can't actually help you do this. Um, but yeah, I think that was illuminating for a lot of folks. It's something that I've been working on a lot recently, is understanding how to actually use the AI in a productive way in a development environment. Because like just tab completion is not helpful, it turns out. I've had actually employees that have just disabled it completely because the tab completion just kept getting in the way of them trying to get something done. It was always giving them the wrong thing, no matter how many times they use it. It was always giving them the wrong thing, and then we're having to like delete, 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 delete. Oh, I tabbed. Now I completed an entire like almost a half a page of stuff that I have to now just go and like highlight, delete, and then start again, then try to put it in there again. So I think that
Yeah, I haven't.
experimenting with that.
I will have to check that out because it's something I'm kind of split on. You know, there's a part of me that's a bit stubborn and thinking, "Ah, I don't really want to use it. You know, I'd rather learn how to do these things myself and kind of, you know, is it going to be that helpful?" But then I do wonder if it is going to have a transformative effect over time, right? And really become something that needs to be integrated properly. And if you start now, is that going to kind of give you a heads up on how to integrate some of these tools and things? I don't know. I think it's still an open question, right? I think a lot of people are trying. I do think, I don't know, maybe I'll need to be put myself out there on this, but in terms of embedded systems, there's so many different aspects that you need to consider when writing embedded software that I think giving any sort of tool all of that information and context to make those decisions would be really difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, you can talk to engineers who I said have been in this space for a long time, and they have enough trouble getting design and spec information, you know, from customers, whether that's, you know, external clients or just internally as part of the company, deciding what do you want to do, or what are the requirements. So if you can't even get that, how are you going to then hand that over, you know, to an AI or to a tool of any sort? I suppose it could, you know, definitely already it's at the point where if you're coming across a tool that you haven't used before and you just need some basic knowledge to kind of compress, you know, existing tutorials and things. I've seen people talk about being really good at that, right? And allowing you to gain that knowledge faster and become more effective. But from what I've seen people talking about, it's also still at the point where you probably then have to go and double check that information or find, you know, an actual reference. And then of course you've still got that problem then of, okay, where did that information come from?
Oh my
You
gosh.
know, was that from a Stack Overflow answer? Is that from the official docs? Is that from the official docs from 2022 or from 2025? And is it even accurate? Because, you know, there's bugs in everything anyway.
Yep.
To a certain extent. So
That is a nice thing about hardware. Hardware
I
doesn't
don't know.
lie. Hardware doesn't lie. The spec sheets lie, but the hardware doesn't lie.
Right. And that's kind of what I'm saying, you know, in terms of the embedded system side of things, especially if you're doing electromechanical systems, where you've got moving parts, things interacting with the real world. There's so much stuff that we can't model accurately. And I mean, an AI coding agent is not going to be able to capture all of that. Well, at the moment, anyway.
Yeah.
Maybe in the future, you know, we'll have things that can approximate physical problems like slip and, you know, multi-body dynamic problems and those kind of things.
Well, that's what
well
MATLAB's
enough.
for, right? MATLAB's for that. They'll just take care of
Well,
that for
I
you.
mean, yeah, exactly.
Just give the AI access to
handle a lot of
MATLAB. You
that
should be
stuff.
fine.
Numerical approximation, but I saw one recently talking about using machine learning at least for approximating something to do with magnetic fields inside a nuclear fusion reactor, and speeding up the calculation on that significantly, which was then allowing them to keep it stable for longer. Now that's not, you know, that's quite a bit different than Copilot or something like that, but potentially using
It's the
some of the
same idea.
underlying tool. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I don't know. What I mean, what did you think? Did you think it was completely out there, or?
Well, so I asked, and this is what, and so the other thing about these panel discussions is you get to see the people that did the video, and you get to ask them the questions, and they're there. Like I can't just well, for some of these folks, I can't just reach out to them and be like, hey, can you answer this question, and not only answer it for me, but answer it for everybody else. Like I can't just do that. So there was Joe Schneider and Luca and Darwin and James did a panel on agile, and so I got to ask a question. So I hopped in there and asked a question, and I mean, to be clear, it was absolutely lovely. I was walking my dog to the beach, and then I was walking the dog on the beach, listening to their answer.
Oh, okay,
And
cool.
if you watch the video, Joe's in his car, James is in his car, Luca's standing outside a conference. This is like this is fantastic. Like to be able to
Yeah.
be able to interact with these folks and actually get to talk with these folks in this way is just and not have to like, oh well, hold on, I got to fly somewhere, I got to drive over here, take my whole weekend and the next week after. Like it's just fabulous. But
Well, I mean, that is a point that's worth raising, I suppose, is, we met at Embedded World recently, and we're kind of in a fortunate position where we can fly to those events. You can afford the travel or expense it to a company or whatever, but not everybody can do that,
no, yeah,
because maybe they're students or they're from a poorer part of the world or whatever it might be. They can't take the time off for family and those kind of things. So I think having this as a, like you said, remote first kind of asynchronous multi-time zone event, hopefully has opened it up to a lot more
oh
people,
yeah. I would not have
would have
sent. I mean,
been able to attend an in-person event.
I would not, I wouldn't send my employees to an in-person training event that had these talks because it wouldn't, it's more of a crapshoot. If you
Yeah,
send a bunch of people
yeah, yeah,
to a
yeah.
training session, like, okay, okay, there's a track, you've got, three that you can fit in today, okay, you go to this one, you go to this one, you go to this one. All right. And then like, then the three of you get together and talk about it afterwards. Then like, okay,
Mhm.
how did it go or whatever. But then since it's embedded, since it's online first, everybody gets the same experience. And it's not like, well, I'll watch the video later. And like a lot of the stuff, yeah, you can watch the videos later, but the ability to then interact with them and then interact with other people in the industry at the same time, like, so I asked, like, because they were talking about agile and they were talking about development processes, like, well, how do you guys think AI is going to change the development process? And Darwin pointed out that we need the process even more now because if you're using AI to generate this code or interact with the code in any way, you have no idea what it's doing
Yeah,
and how much time. We can't even do code reviews of our own software, of each other's software, let alone take the time to fully understand what an AI is going to dump out now too. And it's like,
yeah,
we're bad at reading other people's code and understanding and being able to critique it. So like we're using AI to critique code now. Like, oh, could you read this code and tell me what it does and if there's anything wrong with it? Like we're using AI to do code reviews. So like, so like we need the development process even more than we did before. Um, Joe's point was that regardless of if you like it or not, it's a power tool. I think
mhm.
he compared it to a power hammer. You know, uh, my team's compared it to a saw. Like you can saw wood, yeah, that's fine. You got a shoulder, you got an elbow, you can saw wood. But if you've got a chainsaw, like that's going to saw wood a lot faster. If you got a circular saw, if you got a chop saw, like, but you're much more likely to cut your arm off with a chainsaw than you are with a handsaw.
Yeah,
So does that mean you shouldn't use a chainsaw? Well, enjoy like your artisanal crafted, one cabinet a year, carpentry business because like these guys are just going to be tearing you like they're making hundreds now. And um, so I think being able to take advantage, learning how to take advantage of it and use it is going to be absolutely necessary going forward. I don't think anybody's figured out exactly how to use it yet and what it's going to be good for, and that's what we're experimenting with now. And from an embedded system standpoint, I think the agile process, the DevSecOps process, becomes even more important because of the introduction of
yeah,
AI. And to see it in 2025 and it's still being a big thing that we're still talking about, it's like, guys, we shouldn't be talking. This should just be the water we're drinking now. This should be the air we're breathing. Like it's coming. Like the people who write Node and JavaScript applications are coming. Like, like, and they're not going to understand all the things I've been doing this for 30 years. I really understand how electrons flow around the system. It's like, that's really important, but we're going to have to collaborate more to be able to do this. So we need to be able to have the tooling and the ability to abstract. A lot of the talks were about abstracting the hardware away,
Hmm.
which I thought was really interesting too. Because like, oh, don't we? There aren't. This is how. There's a whole how thing for this, but different ways of creating hows and different ways of setting them up and different ways of thinking about them. And it's
Yeah,
like really
that's very
thinking about
true.
that
Yeah.
hardware abstraction layer is super important because when you introduce an AI, like, I mean, not to promote my own YouTube channel, but like that, I'm trying to do this. I'm trying to vibe code and then have it run it on the hardware and then get the data back from the
Yeah.
hardware and
Yeah.
see what actually happens. And it's reading the serial port, and it's reading the serial, and so it's putting in print statements and then checking the serial port. I was completely
Mm-hmm.
shocked. It basically did a printf debugging, and I didn't have to interact with it at all. It did printf debugging, figured out what the problem was, adjusted the code so that the debounce algorithm was more accurate, and then shipped it again and said, "Hey, it works now,"
Yeah,
and
I
it
mean,
did.
I agree. So the abstraction of the software is something that's been um, emphasized throughout so many of these talks at Embedded Online Conference over the years. I would say the value of separating your application logic from the hardware, from the physical reality of the system that it's running on, that enables you to write better unit tests, to write emulation layers, simulation if you need to be able to run the system offline against recorded test data, all of those kind of things, right? It is supported by doing that kind of abstraction. And that also enables, as you were saying, that agile process to come into play as much as possible. So there's always going to be physical constraints on the system. If you're building a robotic arm, you need to have a full robotic arm that's been built before you can really say whether it works or not. But there's a lot of logic layers that you can work on where you don't need that hardware to get it working and bring that feedback cycle faster, faster, faster. And kind of as you're saying, the AI is a tool that can help you speed up that iteration process potentially, right? Or do some on its own or whatever it is. But that is then even more reliant on having an efficient process in place, a pipeline for building the binary, getting debug information out, interacting with the system, at a low level, um, maybe like an engineering interface, or of course, if you've got simulation, that you can then chuck all of that in a container, right, and spin up however many of them you want. So I feel like these elements, they're kind of combining potentially, right? They're those base blocks of the pyramid to enable faster iteration. And the reason you want that is, yes, okay, more features, but also that agile idea of taking lots of small steps towards your final goal, which you might not know exactly what that is when you start,
Right.
right? And so, as
By
you
the way, engineers do not like hearing that.
Well, yeah, there's different constraints. Like I said, the physical part of things doesn't quite work that way yet,
Yeah.
right? The building PCBs or building like large metal things that needed to be welded and bolted together, those kind of things aren't at that level. But how much of your system, how much of the software, whether it's embedded or not, can you get to that point so that you can leverage all of these tools and just leverage the process um, to hopefully build the thing that you actually need, right, more quickly and more effectively.
Oh my
And
gosh.
that's the thing that I think I've definitely picked up from listening to, like I said, people with a lot of experience in the industry talk about how they build systems effectively. But is also a point that I think a lot of companies doing embedded software um, don't fully understand yet.
Yeah. I think I forget who it was that mentioned that. Um, oh, it was the conversation that you guys were having, the security folks were having about, designing your system so that you've got your first, your MVP is just one thing that it does one thing. designing your
Yeah.
embedded system with the understanding that it's going to be updated, that you can
Mm-hmm.
update it over the air, that you can push out new versions of this firmware, and like making sure that your MVP, your first release, is this providing a way to prove that the update you're pushing to the system is okay to install, and like having that and one feature is like that's great. Do that so that then you can then update that, you can iterate on that, and you can continue to push those things out. Because and I've talked with folks that the reason they don't push updates to their systems is because they're going to brick them because they don't have a trustworthy,
Yeah.
updatable system. And it's like, some of us drive electric cars that are updated on a regular basis by the company who we bought it from. And so like you have to trust the update from like you can't just be like, oh well, I'd love to update my car. I'd love to push an update to this critical feature, but I might brick a handful of cars, so we can't you have to have a trustable over the air
Yeah, no,
updating system. Like that should be the air that we breathe and the water that we drink. Like that should be
sure.
what you do. And we're not there yet. And it's like, okay, well, how do we get there? Like,
All right, there's two things I want to say about that. So one is I agree with the point in terms of the infrastructure and the tooling, and I think the embedded side of things, because there's so many different architectures, chips, boards, and everyone who's manufacturing them has their own incentives to keep people in their own kind of walled garden, right?
mm,
Um, I feel like on the website we've had Node and a bunch of different tools, and people understand how to get things running on AWS and hook that up to a MongoDB or all these kind of systems. And there's a lot of open source tooling that's in place to allow you to just quickly like get that up and running. And like you said, just push updates to the server and have that running. I feel like that infrastructure is lacking on the embedded side, and there are companies that are working on building it out in a non-vendor specific
yeah,
way, but that's still in development, I would
yeah,
say,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And it's definitely not in widespread use, but it is something that is needed. But I can't remember who was in that Q&A session in the security one with me who made the point that you were saying about the importance of doing these updates and designing systems to be able to handle updates and having that be part of the process. I think they were emphasizing, those secure updates from the beginning, right, was the thing that they were trying to talk about. Um, I felt like I understood where they're coming from, and there's a lot of ways where you can say that you understand that point of view, but I also think we need to have a little bit more I don't know what's the right way to put this, a bit more trust with the companies that are doing this, or maybe there's some need for regulation because, the example you gave, okay, my car gets updated. Well, what about when BMW updates my car and now I can't heat the seats unless I pay, a $40 a month subscription or whatever? I never asked for that update, right? But at the same time, if I turn off those updates, if I go in and rip out the 4G antenna so that it physically can't phone home, and I hack the CAN bus and tell it that it's still allowed to turn on, then maybe I'm going to miss some sort of critical security update. And now anyone with a Bluetooth connection can unlock my car because of some bug,
Yep.
right? But as customers, as consumers, and that stands even for businesses, who are paying for these devices and want those updates, there's not enough control at the moment about what is updatable, what is a security update, where what's going to completely change my functionality. And I feel like that trust is kind of being broken. I think a lot of people are very skeptical of that kind of thing, and they either um, completely pretend that it's not happening and just turn on all the updates and are just constantly surprised and bemused by what's happening to their system, or they're really, really skeptical and will constantly be asked, do you want to update? Do you want to update? No, this is a really important security vulnerability. You have to update. And they'll just say no because
Yeah.
they've been burned.
Yeah. It's this has been happening for 20 years in the embedded space. You look at John Deere and the right to repair, like,
Right, right.
do you have the right to repair your tractor? The embedded medical space, do you as the consumer as the hospital, do I have the right to update my own devices? Do I have to perform maintenance on these devices, or do I have to call the company
Mhm.
in to do that? And how do they, when are they going to get me on their calendar? And like, so like, this is not a solved problem, and there is a cultural, like a societal cultural thing that it comes down to too. And people that I've talked about with some of the uh, IP, that was the first question that everybody asked whenever we started talking about AI, was like, well, what do you do about IP? What do you do about IP? What about my intellectual property? And the thing that I keep coming back to is like, well, intellectual property is a societal construct. There are
Mhm.
societies that are participating in this global market that do not have a concept of IP.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
they don't have a problem with training their AI on whatever anybody creates because they don't have a concept of IP. So if we're going to shut down all these AI models because, oh, we can't let them violate IP, well, the only models that are going to be available then are the ones that don't care about IP because we're in a global
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
marketplace. And so, like,
Yeah.
these are, so then it's like, okay, well, then the only car you can have is a 57 Chevy that doesn't have a computer in it because, well, then no one's going to build you a computer that they can't update. So if you're just going to make, oh no, you're going to make it so that anybody can, no, nope, we're not going to allow updates if that I don't want. I have to approve, and I'm going to select which updates I'm going to take, which updates I'm not going to take. If you
Yeah.
kind of unlock that, then it's like, okay, well, then the companies that's going to be very tough for them to stay in business. It's going to be tough for them to continue to provide the level of service that they'd like to provide. So there's a give and a take, and then we're going to have to
Mhm.
reevaluate what does it even mean to own something. Do I get to own my BMW that's getting updates over the air? Do I have the right to the seat heater that's in the car that I paid for? Do I have the right to use that? Like, is that something I have a fundamental human right to? I,
Yeah,
I
no, I mean
paid for
it's
this
pretty
car.
philosophical, right?
I paid for this car. It is my car. It's got seat heaters in it. I should be able to turn them on or off at my will, right? Because I paid for it. But then it's software. So like, no, it's the software that enables that physical thing to happen. And do you own the software? And I was like, can't we all just be nice and like figure it like but then, I run a small business. Like, if we are staying afloat because of a subscription model, and that's the way we're able to continue to drive business and drive innovation and drive revenue into the business, then I'm going to encourage my users to have a subscription model. Well, cars are not a subscription
Yeah,
model,
yeah,
but so it's like
yeah.
it's almost ridiculous that we kind of expect the car company. I paid them once for my car 10 years ago, and they are still
Mhm.
expected to, that car is, I expect that car to work 10 years from now without ever giving that company any more money necessarily, except for parts and labor. Like, you know,
Yeah, I mean, we've got a bit sidetracked from talking about EOC now, but I think this is a really interesting conversation. Um, I mean, car manufacturers have to provide warranties on the manufacturer on the sorry, on the mechanical components,
yes.
right? Which is, I don't know when that started to become the norm, but that's how it is. Um, and I'm sure there are some electrical components in electric cars, that they need to provide warranties for motors and fuses and all those kind of things. So from that perspective, I think it would be reasonable to say, well, the software should have some kind of warranty on it also, to that you need to make sure that it keeps working. And if you push an update that bricks my car, then yeah, you are responsible
Right.
for that. But does that also give you the right to turn off features that I like, or to completely change my dashboard settings in that I never asked for, or to track, everywhere where I've been driving over the past 5 years and sell that information to anybody who wants it?
Yep.
Do you know
Yep.
what I'm saying?
Yep.
I mean, I agree it's a complicated problem. I think maybe in the future there will be more separation or choice in some of these things. I mean, I know it sounds ridiculous, maybe right now, but why is my car manufacturer the only agent who's allowed to update the software in my car? I own the car and all the chips inside it. So why don't I have the right to make changes to that software or allow someone to do it on my behalf? Right? I mean, there's garages you can go to that are kind of approved aftermarket modifiers or fixers for certain brands. So you could imagine a world where there are people who specialize in software for certain car brands, models, certain vehicle types, whatever it is, and they'll make changes and updates to your car, and you hand over some kind of secure key or some kind of access code that allows them to make those changes, and then maybe they
Oof,
take on your kind of warranty
the
and stuff rather than
liability.
the
Yeah.
original manufacturer. Yeah, but I just think it has to be part of the conversation to say how consumers going to handle this, because it's not, the current situation is that a lot of the companies are acting in a similar way, and so there isn't really competition in the marketplace for different ways of handling this. And I think you well, maybe you'll agree with me, a lot of companies are not handling updates and secure updates very well at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's almost like for a lot of products, especially in embedded systems, they're so niche, there might only be a couple of manufacturers. And if they're all horrible at updates,
Ugh.
who are you going to go to? Do you know what I mean?
Well, and someone in your talk also, they talked about the fact that these companies go out of business.
Yeah.
And now who's
Yeah.
responsible for pushing updates and maintaining the software, if that's a thing. And if they went
Yeah.
out of business because, they had a poor financial decision that ran them out of business, or because, Maytag is the example in America where it's like, oh, you got the Maytag man. The Maytag repairman doesn't have anything to do all day.
Yeah.
We've got a company that was local here in Florida that did sprinkler systems. They are the best sprinkler systems you could ever get. Guess what? They're not in business anymore because
Mhm.
their business model was selling sprinkler systems. So they did that. And they made them out of such high quality and they never broke. So when everybody had bought one, there was no more money for that company to then continue to operate. So they went out of
Yeah.
business.
Yeah.
And so then the companies that are now like I can still get parts from them because the hardware supply store down the street um, has all of the equipment that they were all the parts they were throwing out when they were going out of business. They took them.
Right.
They're
Right.
like, oh, here, give me those.
Yeah.
So I can
Yeah.
still get parts from them because they exist at the hardware store here. But
Yeah.
if it breaks and you don't have access to that hardware store, then you just have to go get one of these, and they're actually making a worse product. But because they're making a worse product, they can actually stay in business longer. And so like the tying it back to like, well, the embedded systems, and you talk about the walled garden, like, well, those walled gardens are there for a reason, and that's to increase revenue in that specific business. But
Yeah.
and we as consumers think, well, that's bad. But as a business owner and someone that's running a business, no, I need revenue to continue to support you and the things that you need to do with the product that I gave you. So it's like, uh, I don't, yeah,
Well, I've definitely read about some medical device examples where people have implants,
yeah,
either brain implants. There's things that go in your lower lumbar now to give people who have spinal issues the ability to walk again, or insulin pumps, that are kind of closed loop systems, pacemakers, all those kind of things that have software in them that are updatable. And there's stories of companies going out of business, and
yeah,
people have to have these devices surgically removed
yeah,
because they are like non-functional or cannot be shown, to be reliable anymore. And so, yeah, I think that is a question that people need to think about. And I suppose in terms of this conference and people attending it, the thought is here's the right way to implement some of these things. And also, please think about it, towards the start of the development process. Please think about these questions.
yes,
At the end of the day, engineers are the ones who actually get this stuff working to the point where it can go out into the real world and have an impact. So we need to be aware of what are the right tools to use, what are the right ways of doing things, and what are the potential pitfalls, of certain approaches that might increase profits or revenue in the short term, right? But what's going to be the long-term impact of that.
Yep.
Was there a talk you saw that was about something you didn't know anything about, or something kind of really new that you learned, or that someone kind of brought attention to by what they were talking about?
I mean, I'll mention Jeff Gable's talk about the QP framework, and
Yeah.
and as someone who's newer to the embedded system space, how much you have to think about when things happen and how they happen. Like even designing software systems, complicated software systems. We've built an emulator, and like how do you get data from one? And our emulator is written in Rust, and Rust forces you to really think about how do you get data from one place to another? And it's this Rust is really this interesting mix of like, there's some functional programming aspects of it where you have to pass in all the data, and then there's some like, well, but
Mhm.
it's C and C++ enough. You can have global data that, or you can have a class that's got some stuff in it that you can just reference here. So you don't have to pass this data into everything. So it's like it's this interesting mix. And so thinking about the message passing part of it, the actor model, the pub sub kind of stuff, and like, and then how that this QP framework is out there that kind of handles a lot of that for you, so you don't really have to worry about it. And it's almost like, oh my gosh, thank you. I wish that I just had that for some other systems that I want. We've there are some in Rust has some libraries that are like that, but it's not the first thing I reach for when I'm like, I need to start a new thing. Like here it is, let me try this. So I thought that was pretty good. And yeah, I think yeah, that was something I hadn't thought about before and hadn't really seen.
Nice. Will you go back and watch it?
Oh,
Be part of the conference again next year?
oh yes, I will be back next year. No, unless Jacob doesn't approve my pass.
I get a talk. I get a talk from Tulip Tree.
Oh, absolutely. I think now I was a little I was thinking about putting together a talk and talking to Jacob about it, but I didn't really know what I could bring to the table for you guys, and
Mhm.
kind of seeing just the diversity and the range of talks, and even some like really basic stuff, or what I might think of as really basic stuff, to
Yeah,
more
yeah.
complicated stuff. I was like, oh, there's a lot of opportunity here, so I would love to participate next year.
Nice. Yeah, I'd be really interested to see what you come up with.
All right, Tim. Well, thanks for chatting with me.
Yeah,
And
no, it's been excellent.
okay. And yeah, this has been a magpie in a tree, or whatever we're calling this thing. All right, see you guys.